My fiancée told me she was pregnant with my brother's child before our wedding. My parents sided with him. When I think about the moment my life shattered, it wasn't the loud explosion you'd expect. It was quiet, like the sound of a thread snapping. That thread unraveled everything I thought I knew. My younger brother, Ryan, had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. He had a child with Emma, my fiancée. Looking back, maybe I should have seen it coming. Growing up, Ryan had always been the golden child. My parents, Tom and Linda, doted on him as if he could do no wrong. He was the star athlete, the charming one, the kid who could break a vase and make them laugh about it. Meanwhile, I was the reliable older brother, the one who worked hard and faded into the background. My parents' favoritism wasn't malicious, it was just there, a quiet undercurrent that shaped every family interaction. By the time I was old enough to leave, I was determined to build a life that didn't revolve around being second best. That's where Emma came in. I met her during a rare, carefree night out with friends. She had this magnetic energy that made the rest of the world fade away. We talked for hours that first night, and I remember thinking that maybe, just maybe, I'd found someone who saw me, really saw me. Over time, we built a life together that felt solid and safe. She moved into my small but cozy apartment, and we spent weekends cooking elaborate meals or exploring hiking trails. She was my anchor, the person who made the world feel steady when everything else felt uncertain. A year ago, I proposed. It was a simple, intimate moment, just the two of us at a cabin by the lake. I'd always dreamed of a low-key life, and Emma fit into that vision perfectly. She cried when I asked her to marry me, and I took that as a good sign. In hindsight, it might have been something else entirely, guilt, hesitation, or maybe even regret. At the time, though, I was too caught up in the romance of it all to notice anything out of place. Things started to change after that. At first, it was little things. Emma began spending more time with my family, especially Ryan. She claimed it was to bond with them before the wedding. It made sense, I told myself. She wanted to be part of my life completely, and family was a big part of that. But there was something about the way she and Ryan interacted that didn't sit right with me. They laughed a little too hard at each other's jokes, exchanged glances that felt too familiar. I brushed it off. Emma was friendly, Ryan was charming, what else could it be? I ignored the signs because I wanted to believe in the life we were building. I had worked so hard to escape the shadow of my childhood, to create a space where I wasn't the forgotten older brother. Emma was supposed to be my partner in that. She was supposed to choose me, to stand by me in a way no one else ever had. The first real crack appeared on a random Tuesday evening. Emma had been acting distant for weeks, but when I asked her about it, she blamed stress. Planning a wedding was overwhelming, she said. I offered to take on more of the tasks, but she waved me off, saying she'd handle it. That night, I found her sitting on the couch, staring at her phone with a look I couldn't quite place. When she noticed me, she quickly put the phone down and forced a smile. I told myself I was imagining things, that she was just tired. But the uneasy feeling lingered. It was in the way she'd turn away when I entered the room, the way her laughter felt hollow when we were alone. Then there was Ryan, who started showing up more often than usual. He'd always been the type to pop in unannounced, but now it felt excessive. He'd bring Emma coffee, stay for hours under the guise of helping her with wedding plans, and make casual comments that seemed offhand but left me unsettled. I didn't want to be the paranoid fiancé, so I buried my doubts. I told myself that Emma loved me, that Ryan was just being his usual overbearing self. But deep down, a part of me knew something was wrong. I just wasn't ready to face it. The tipping point came one evening when Emma left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. A notification popped up, and out of habit, I glanced at it. It was a message from Ryan. The preview read, "We need to talk about the baby." My heart stopped. The baby? Whose baby? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more horrifying than the last. I didn't open the message. I couldn't bring myself to cross that line, even though a part of me screamed that I should. Instead, I sat there, staring at the phone until Emma came back into the room. She noticed me immediately, her eyes darting to the phone before she quickly grabbed it. She didn't say anything, but the tension in the room was palpable. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every interaction between Emma and Ryan, every moment that had felt off but that I'd dismissed. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and it was one I didn't want to see. I felt like a fool for ignoring the signs, for convincing myself that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I told myself I'd confront Emma, that I'd get to the bottom of whatever was going on. But deep down, I was terrified of what I might find. This was the beginning of the end, though I didn't fully realize it yet. The uneasy feeling in my gut was growing, and the cracks in our seemingly perfect life were becoming impossible to ignore. Something was coming, and I had a sinking feeling it was going to destroy everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. The morning after I saw that message on Emma's phone, she dropped a bombshell that changed everything. She sat me down at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she struggled to meet my eyes. Then she said it: she was pregnant. For a fleeting moment, I felt joy and hope. But that moment evaporated when she admitted the child wasn't mine. The father was Ryan. It was like the floor dropped out from under me. My mind raced, but nothing made sense. I felt every emotion at once: anger, betrayal, disbelief, even shame. How could the two people I trusted most do this to me? My chest tightened as I thought back to all those moments I had ignored, the lingering looks, the inside jokes, the unexplained absences. The signs had been there, but I had been too blind, too trusting, to see them for what they were. In that moment, everything came rushing back. The favoritism Ryan always enjoyed, the way he had a knack for taking whatever he wanted and leaving me with the scraps. This wasn't just about Emma. It was about years of being overshadowed and overlooked, of never being good enough for the people who were supposed to love me. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, something raw and open that I couldn't hide from. I couldn't stay silent. I told Emma to pack her things and leave. My voice was cold, detached, as if I was watching myself from the outside. She begged me to understand, said she hadn't meant for it to happen. But her words were just noise. All I could think about was how easily she had destroyed everything we had built together. As Emma left the apartment, I called Ryan. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone. He answered on the third ring, his voice casual, as if nothing was wrong. When I told him we needed to talk, he didn't argue. He showed up an hour later, wearing the same smug expression I had come to resent over the years. The confrontation was ugly. I demanded to know how long it had been going on, how he could betray me like this. Ryan tried to play it off at first, saying it was a mistake, that he hadn't planned for this to happen. But his excuses only fueled my anger. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he had done, to understand the depth of his betrayal. Eventually, his tone shifted. He stopped apologizing and started deflecting, turning the blame back on me. He said I had always been too controlling, too rigid, that Emma had felt trapped in our relationship. He claimed that I had pushed her away, that I had practically driven her into his arms. It was like a punch to the gut. Not only had he taken everything from me, but now he was twisting the knife, making it seem like it was my fault. The argument escalated until I told him to leave and never come back. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, and I was left alone in the wreckage of my life. But the fallout didn't end there. My parents got involved, as they always did when it came to Ryan. When I told them what had happened, they were shocked but quick to defend him. They said it was a family matter, that we needed to move past it for the sake of the baby. They even had the audacity to suggest that I was overreacting, that I should try to forgive them both. Their response broke something in me. I had always known they favored Ryan, but this was different. This wasn't about a broken vase or a missed curfew. This was my life, my future, and they were asking me to just sweep it under the rug. It was as if my feelings didn't matter, as if my pain was an inconvenience they wanted to ignore. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their approval, but no matter what I did, I would never come first. Not to them. Not to Ryan. That night, I sat in the quiet of my empty apartment, trying to make sense of what had happened. The betrayal, the confrontation, the way my family had sided against me, it was too much. I felt like I was drowning, like the walls were closing in around me. But amidst the chaos, one thing became clear: I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness for people who didn't care about me. I didn't know what my next step would be, but I knew I had to make a choice. I could either stay and let their betrayal define me, or I could walk away and start over. It was a choice between holding on to the past or fighting for a future where I could finally be free. The weight of it pressed down on me, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of determination. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I knew one thing: I was done being second best. As the night stretched on, I made a silent vow to myself. I would confront the pain, face the fallout, and rebuild my life from the ground up. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But I was done living in the shadow of betrayal. I was ready to take back control, no matter what it took. In the weeks that followed, I tried to piece together what was left of my life, but every step forward felt like wading through quicksand. My family, who should have been my support system, turned against me. My mother's calls came daily, each one carrying the same exhausting refrain: that I needed to forgive, to move past what had happened for the sake of the family. My father was no better, his silence a constant reminder of where his loyalties lay. It was as if my pain was inconvenient to them, an obstacle to the image of unity they so desperately clung to. The betrayal extended beyond my family. Friends I had trusted for years began to drift away, their sympathies clearly lying with Ryan. Some of them had always been closer to him, charmed by his easygoing nature and charisma. Now, they acted as if I was the villain in my own story, the one who was making things difficult by refusing to let go. The isolation was suffocating. I'd never felt more alone. To cope, I started therapy. It was something I'd resisted for years, but now it felt like my only option. Each session forced me to confront the layers of anger, sadness, and guilt that I'd been carrying. My therapist helped me see how much of my self-worth had been tied to the approval of others, my parents, my friends, even Emma. Letting go of that need felt impossible, but I knew I had to try. What haunted me most was the thought of the child. A part of me couldn't stop wondering what it would have been like if the baby had been mine. I'd always imagined being a father, building a family that was nothing like the one I'd grown up in. Now, that dream felt tainted. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the loss of what could have been. Every time I thought about Emma and Ryan raising that child together, it felt like a knife twisting deeper. Adding salt to the wound, Emma and Ryan didn't shy away from flaunting their new life. Social media became a stage for their happiness, every post a carefully curated display of their love. They moved in together, sharing photos of their new home, their future nursery, their weekends spent smiling in places I'd once visited with Emma. I tried to avoid looking, but curiosity and pain drew me back again and again, each glimpse a fresh reminder of everything I had lost. The turning point came on a night when I couldn't sleep. I found myself scrolling through their latest post, a picture of them holding a sonogram, their captions full of joy and excitement. My chest felt heavy, my breath shallow. I realized that as long as I stayed here, surrounded by these reminders, I would never heal. The constant interference from my family, the loss of friends, the shadow of Emma and Ryan, it was all too much. I needed to escape. I made the decision to leave. The next day, I began looking for jobs in a different city, somewhere far enough away that I could start fresh. It wasn't an easy choice. Cutting ties with my family felt like severing a part of myself, but staying meant drowning in their expectations and disappointment. I couldn't keep living for people who refused to see me, who cared more about appearances than my happiness. Packing my things, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Leaving meant freedom, but it also meant admitting that I couldn't fix what was broken. As I stood in the empty apartment, I knew this was only the beginning. The wounds were still raw, the betrayal still fresh. Moving away wouldn't erase the pain, but it was a step toward reclaiming my life. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. The past had a way of catching up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to come. Starting over wasn't as simple as packing a bag and moving away. It was a constant battle between hope and doubt, between the need for freedom and the weight of everything I left behind. But when I arrived in the new city, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: possibility. The first few weeks were about survival. I found a modest apartment and took the first job I could get, working long hours in an office that demanded little of me beyond my presence. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt untethered from the expectations of others. It was exhausting but liberating. Yet the past had a way of following me. One evening, as I was unpacking a box of books, my phone buzzed with a call from my parents. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Against my better judgment, I picked up. My father's voice was sharp, accusing me of abandoning the family. He said my decision to leave had caused a rift, that I needed to come back and make things right. My mother chimed in, her tone softer but no less manipulative, urging me to think of Ryan and the baby. Their words hit like a tidal wave, dragging me back to the suffocating dynamics I had tried so hard to escape. They spoke of family unity, of forgiveness, but not once did they acknowledge my pain. It was as if my feelings were irrelevant, as if the only thing that mattered was preserving the illusion of harmony. For years, I had swallowed my frustrations, stayed silent to keep the peace. But this time, something in me snapped. I told them everything: how their favoritism had chipped away at me, how their constant defense of Ryan had made me feel invisible, how their refusal to stand by me in my darkest moment had broken something I couldn't repair. My voice shook, but I didn't stop until every word I'd been holding back was out in the open. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. For a brief moment, I thought they might finally understand. But then my father's voice returned, cold and dismissive. He accused me of being selfish, of tearing the family apart with my bitterness. My mother's attempt to mediate only made it worse, her platitudes falling flat. I realized then that nothing I said would ever change their perspective. They had made their choice, and I needed to make mine. I ended the call without saying goodbye and turned off my phone. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight I'd been carrying my entire life had finally been lifted. Cutting ties wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I couldn't move forward while clinging to people who refused to see me for who I was. In the days that followed, I threw myself into building a new routine. I explored the city, found a coffee shop that felt like home, and even started attending a local book club. It was small, tentative steps, but each one felt like progress. I began to see that life outside the shadow of my family and past was possible, even if it was unfamiliar. Standing on my small balcony one evening, watching the city lights flicker, I made a promise to myself. This was my chance to create something better, to build a life that wasn't defined by betrayal or resentment. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be days when the past would creep back in. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my story. And that was a beginning worth holding on to. The turning point in my new life came when I least expected it. I met her at the book club I'd joined shortly after moving. Her name was Claire, and she had this quiet confidence about her that drew people in. We started talking after one of the meetings, and before I knew it, we were meeting for coffee, sharing stories, and spending more and more time together. There was something refreshing about Claire. She listened without judgment, and for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Our connection grew quickly but naturally. Claire wasn't just kind, she was also ambitious and full of ideas. She'd been dreaming of starting a small business, and when she shared her vision with me, I couldn't help but be inspired. The idea was simple but promising, a cozy bookshop and cafe that would be a haven for people like us, those looking for a fresh start or a quiet escape. I used my savings to help get it off the ground, and together, we poured our energy into making it a reality. The first few months were challenging but rewarding. We spent long hours setting up the space, picking out books, and perfecting the menu. Every decision felt personal, a reflection of the life we were building together. The day we opened the doors, I felt a sense of pride I hadn't known before. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was creating something meaningful. 6 months into our relationship, Claire dropped another life-changing surprise. She told me she was pregnant. Her words were filled with joy and a hint of nervousness, but all I felt was overwhelming happiness. The thought of being a father again, of starting a family with someone who truly cared about me, was more than I could have hoped for. I reassured her that we were in this together, and for the first time in years, the future didn't feel so uncertain. Our lives moved quickly after that. We decided to get married in a small ceremony with just a few close friends and her family. Claire's parents welcomed me with open arms, treating me like the son they'd always wanted. Their support was unwavering, and with their help, we managed to buy a modest but beautiful house. It was nothing extravagant, but it was ours. The kind of home where memories could be made and where I could finally feel grounded. When our son was born, I experienced a kind of happiness I didn't think was possible. Holding him for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and purpose. He was perfect, a reminder that even after everything I'd been through, life had a way of surprising you with its blessings. Claire and I named him Lucas, and from that moment on, he became the center of our world. Every day since then has been a mix of chaos and joy, sleepless nights and quiet moments of gratitude. As I watch Lucas grow, I'm reminded of the journey that brought me here. The betrayal and pain I endured feel like a distant memory, overshadowed by the love and peace I've found. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and for the first time, that's more than enough.